We are talking about ministry teams. And, we've got I'll show you a slide at the very end of the presentation of 21 of the ministry teams that we have that are in the booklets. Mark, the booklets are back there on the shelf, the kitchen window shelf. So they're hot off the press, so you can help yourself to one of those. It will show the 21 ministry teams, although we do have more than 21 ministry teams. It's just that a couple of them aren't ones that people can just sign up for. They are kind of unique. And so there are a couple additional ministries as well to what is in that booklet. But the obvious question here that I want to ask just right out of the gates in talking about this is, why do we call them what we're calling them? And I'm specifically saying in regards to calling them teams. I'll make a couple of comments about the ministry word aspect of it here in a little bit. But first of all, I just want to talk about this idea of teams. Why call it ministry teams and not call it ministry something else? Because one of the things that comes to a lot of people's minds when they think about teams is they think about competition, right? I mean, teams, competition, 49ers, Chiefs, competition, or you think about any, of the different types of leagues, basketball, football, baseball, whatever. You think all about competition there. But the reality of the matter is, we're using this word, and we've been using this word for almost 25 years now, and we're almost 25 years old as a church, not because it has anything to do with competition, it doesn't, but because teams also communicates teamwork, and that is the concept I really want us to have an understanding on here. And those of you that played organized sports at some point in time in your life, you may have a better appreciation, of this than what others might have. I played basketball and football, junior high and senior high, and there is teamwork that is a part of basketball. There's no doubt about that. But football, in a far greater way, teamwork is just absolutely critical, because the roles involved in football, the different positions, whether it be on the offense or once you throw in the defense and you throw in the special teams. I mean, there are so many different types of positions and responsibilities that teamwork is absolutely critical. You could have a couple of people that are just outstanding stars, very athletic and all this on a football team, but yet you can still get beat really bad if you're coming up against someone who is much more organized, and they work as a team and they complement one another. And so that's the idea that's ingrained within our ministry teams, is this concept of teamwork. It's like someone once said, when a team works well together as a unit, they're able to accomplish more than its individual members can do alone. And there's a lot of truth to that. All right, the alternative, I'll throw this out there. If we didn't call them teams, what would we call them? The obvious answer or possibility on that would be we would call them committees. In fact, that's the traditional term, and that is what a lot of churches and organizations, they still operate on that basis. I want to share just a few words, though, about committees, about this older traditional approach that some of you in here were a part of church at one time that was filled with committees, right? Right? I mean, yeah. And I know I was, and I was an associate pastor, and I was a senior pastor, in a church like that. And there's some very real reasons why when we started Crossroads that, no, we're not going to have any committees. We're going to do this differently. Because when it comes to committees, this older approach to things, it's kind of a domino effect. It involves multiple factors. First of all, this older approach is typically a part of hiring a minister and assigning ministry to him. You know, whatever it is that needs to be done, this is what the minister is about. When I first got out of college and I went into Illinois and was working in a church, you know, that was the designation I had, and I was fine with that. Minister, it sounds like a good designation, but the more I studied in the scripture, the more problems I had with that. Not that there shouldn't be ministers and there shouldn't be ministry happening, but the idea that ministry just happens from the paid ministers at a church is not biblical in any way, shape, or form. And that was the problem that I had. Because, you know, the idea of hiring someone and saying, okay, you got the responsibility of preaching and teaching, you got the responsibility of visiting the sick in the hospital or dropping in on the shut-ins, you got the responsibility of organizing, you know, the Sunday school education department, you know, and all of this kind of stuff. Basically, it ends up that most things end up getting dumped on the minister, and the church will never be able to grow beyond the wingspan of the minister because he's got to have his hand in on everything. And you know, and that's just not healthy for a church. I mean, there's more than one reason, and this is one of those reasons, that we have like 80% of the churches, Protestant churches in the United States, that are running not over 80 or 90 in attendance. I mean, there's that high of a percentage. And this is one of the reasons, is because they've hired a minister. That minister is to do the role of ministry, and he's only got so many hours in a week, and there's only so far that his wingspan of all the different things that he's got to take care of. So it's just really not a healthy thing, and it's not a biblical thing either. Any of you remember the Jethro principle that's in the Old Testament? You know who Jethro is? He wasn't... Yeah, he wasn't the one by the, what'd they call that? The cement pond? You know, he wasn't that one that ate cereal out of one of these great big popcorn bowls. Not that Jethro. And when Moses went back and led the Israelites out of Egypt, and they were successful getting through the parting of the Red Sea and all that stuff, and so God had blessed them and delivered them, then Jethro shows up with Moses' wife and Moses' children to drop them off, because he was kind of keeping them in safekeeping, watching over them while Moses was doing all this. And Moses was celebrating. He was excited to hear all the stories of what God had done in this incredible deliverance. And so he decided to stick around a day or two. And then he saw the next day when Moses got up, he took his seat. They had this location in this big camp of all these Israelites that were kind of heading to Mount Sinai. And they saw Moses take his seat, and people started bringing whatever their disputes were with one another, whatever the disagreements they were having, squabbles, whatever. They lined up and were bringing those to Moses. And it was from early in the morning till late in the day that this was going on. And Jethro couldn't believe what he was seeing, because it was just taking all day, and all these people were standing in line for hours upon hours upon hours. And so Jethro pulls Moses aside, and he says this in Exodus 18, verse 18. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone. I mean, there's just too much. You're trying to do too much, Moses. What you're doing is not smart. I mean, that's basically what he's saying. And then a couple verses later, he says, select capable men from all the people that will make your load lighter, because they will share it with you. So these other people that were capable, qualified people, that they were to take care of, the easier disputes, the medium-sized disputes. And it was only the complicated, big ones then that would go to Moses. And then this way, people wouldn't have to be wearing themselves out all day, and Moses wouldn't be wearing himself out in the process. Well, you see, that same principle applies to our subject matter of ministry in the church. Ministry was never intended to totally wear a person out. And the concept is that it is to be shared among others, and that's where we're headed here. But we're still talking about the older traditional approach. The older traditional approach not only included assigning it to your minister, this guy that you pay, and have him, basically doing the majority of it, but it also involved establishing a church board. And a number of you in here know what that's like. You've been in settings where there was a church board. A lot of times this church board is made up of, the pastor or pastors, the elders, the deacons. They meet together once a month, or maybe once every couple months, or maybe even twice, a month. And basically they make decisions. That's what the board is all about, making decisions, big decisions, little decisions, pretty much all decisions. Once in a while, they don't have enough information to make a decision, and there needs to be a little bit of legwork done. Guess who comes into play there? That's why there's committees. You get a committee. You need to do this before our next elders meeting and find out blah, 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 and research it and everything. But then, once you find that out, you sit on it until our next board meeting, and then you bring it back to the board meeting so a decision can be made on it. And what traditionally happened and happens in churches that still operate oftentimes on this basis is these board meetings, they can drag out really long, depending on what night. We always had ours on Sunday night, and it just made Sunday such a dreadfully long day, because we'd be there past 10 o'clock at night, and the day had started pretty early that morning, and they'd be making decisions about, okay, we really need to recarpet the nursery. So what do you think? Should we get gray, or should we get something that's got a little more color to it? And so you got these people all sitting around in there, discussing what kind of carpet to use in the nursery. And, and I'm sitting there kind of scratching my head like, I don't remember seeing one of you ever volunteering to even work in the nursery. None of us spend any time in the nursery. But yet we're the ones making that decision. And then they talk about, well, we need a new coat of paint in the entry area and in the bathrooms. And so, yeah, let's paint the guy's bathroom such and such color. The girl's bathroom, what do you think? What do you think we should paint that? And then, and there's this discussion that lasts 45 minutes talking about what color the paint should be in the bathroom. You guys, some of you in here are thinking I'm exaggerating. Brad, am I exaggerating? Not a bit. Because we've sat in these kind of painful meetings that every single decision gets processed through, and if there's not enough information, then a committee is assigned the task of doing this and that to get more information. But the committee can't make the decision. The committee then has to report back at the next month's meeting. And so it not only drags out decisions, but all decisions have to be processed through the board, or maybe I should say 98% of decisions get processed through the board. And so in effect, what you end up with is a bottleneck. The board ends up being a bottleneck, and it just slows everything down to a painful grind as far as decisions and the like happening. And in effect, what that does to the committees is it causes the committees to primarily be reactive and not proactive in nature. They're just reacting after problems surface. Then they've got something in front of them that they need to do, but they got to get the instructions, from the board on that. Also, it causes committees to be more maintenance-minded than they are ministry-minded. So for all of those reasons, the old approach just is not the effective approach.